You're asking the voters of St. Pete to hire you. So I guess what would be your greatest strength and your greatest weakness when it comes to serving as a mayor?
I'd say my greatest strength is a record of accomplishment and partnership and making sure that I'm in touch with every part of the community. I think that's what we need going forward, and that's why, growing up here, this was always a place that aspired to be greater. Now we have that opportunity to really become a great city. I want to make sure that everyone is part of that progress and it's inclusive, and that's why our theme is inclusive progress. So that's the strength that I bring to it. In terms of weaknesses, I tend to be a bit of a perfectionist, and so that would be something that, of course, you can't be perfect at everything, but you can aspire to be perfect.
It's your first week on the job. What's the first initiative that you want to get rolling right away?
Well, I've already met with most of the top staff, with the city administrator, Kanika Tomlin. I've met with Mayor Kreisman several times. And so it will be a continuation of that work. I've already started to try to understand the processes, the priorities, where we can make improvements. The top issue, of course, will be hiring a new city administrator, as Deputy Mayor Kanika Tomlin is moving on to Eckerd College. And that is the primary person who will be implementing my administrative direction. And so that'll be a top initiative for me starting the first week. Moving into transition, we'll start actually right after the election. We'll start a transition process. We want to identify opportunities for improvement in key areas like housing, transportation, education, growth management, and where we build in the city. And we want to hear from the people so that this incoming administrator has this list that will really supplement the 2050 plan, but it'll have a list, a database of key opportunities that he or she can look at. And I want to get rolling with business process improvement in all of our areas, from parks to permitting. That's what I've done in the private sector. I think we need to do that in the city as well.
Housing prices in St. Pete are skyrocketing. So what are you going to do to make sure that the city still has affordable housing?
I'm going to continue the work that I've started as a county commissioner. As chair of the county commission, we started a housing trust fund that is funded now with over $100 million. And it has funded affordable housing even here in downtown St. Pete and throughout the city and the county. I want to bring a sense of urgency to getting more truly affordable housing on the ground, housing for folks making the area median income of about $23.50 an hour and less. Most of those 4,000 units of rental that we put on the ground are for folks making $19 an hour and less. And that really needs to happen because, as you can see around us, there's a lot of luxury housing going up. We need housing for the folks that make our city run, and I want to bring some emphasis and priority to that.
St. Pete obviously sits in a beautiful area by the water. That's something that's very important to the city. What do you think is the biggest environmental threat to St. Pete, and what are you going to do about it if you were to be elected as mayor?
Well, the water is our greatest asset. It's also our greatest challenge. We are the epicenter of sea level rise on the west coast of Florida. And along with our friends on the east coast in Miami-Dade and Broward, we have the opportunity and the obligation to set the standard for how you adapt to sea level rise. So we recognize the science. We know that 2 to 9 feet of sea level rise is coming over the next 40, 50 years. And that has to be integrated into all of our planning. In our integrated water resources master plan, that'll fix our sewers and our plants so we can handle the growth, but also sea level rise. But also in housing and transportation, that has to be factored into all the decisions we make. And so it's recognizing the science and adjusting all our processes to the reality that we will be impacted by sea level rise.
So let's turn to sports. Do you think that the Rays should stay in St. Pete? If so, what are you going to do to make sure they stay here? If not, what are you going to do to make sure the city still succeeds without the Rays?
Well, this is personal to me. I grew up at the gas plant. My grandfather's wood yard was there. That's what my first job was, at his wood yard, and that was displaced for the interstate. Our church and almost 1,000 people, offices, businesses were displaced in the pursuit of baseball. And so that promise made 30 plus years ago was for jobs and economic development. And now we have the opportunity to bring that to fruition, hopefully including a new Rays ballpark. I think we've got the partnership, the collaboration. We certainly have the bed tax to help support it, and I help lead allocating a portion of the county's bed tax to fund a potential new Rays stadium as it funded Tropicana Field. And I believe we've got the partnership. So I'm endorsed by 5 county commissioners. They control the bed tax. That conversation will continue. Endorsed by 5 current city council members, and we've started that conversation. And I also have been supported by the Tampa Bay Rays. St. Pete's going to get its turn at bat, and I believe we can hit a grand slam, whether it's at Tropicana Field or right there at Al Lang Stadium, right here on this waterfront. This vista, this view shown worldwide, I think is a winning ticket. So we're going to give it our best shot.
The Rays donated $50,000 to a PAC that supports you. Do you think that your views align with the Rays and what they want to do with downtown St. Pete?
Well, let's be clear. I was far outraised in the primary, and the rules of our campaign system mean you have to raise money to compete. The Rays talked to both candidates, and they made a decision about who would be the best person to lead our city forward. And so we have got a great relationship. Just going back a few years, as I said, I led the effort to add a penny for bed tax for a potential Rays stadium. But even further back than that, Tropicana Field became taxable to the city of St. Petersburg. I think it was a Supreme Court ruling that municipalities had to pay tax. So it was $1 million of tax that would have to be paid by the city of St. Pete. I led the effort on the county commission to support the county taking over ownership. That's why the county now owns Tropicana Field, to make it not taxable to the citizens. So that's how far back my relationship with the Rays goes, and I think their support is reflective of that.
I'm asking both you and your opponent about separate Tampa Bay Times articles that are accusing both of you of making statements several years ago that maybe have offended some people. The newspaper says that you once belonged and shared values of a church that condemned homosexuality. And in a 1995 letter to the paper, you spoke about being pro-family and pro-life and called the National Organization of Women a far-left political group. Have your views changed, and maybe what do you want people to know about you today?
Well, I think if you haven't learned and grown in 30 years, you're not doing it right. And so certainly on the issue like now, my viewpoint, and of course, having raised 2 daughters who are now 19 and 28, I certainly have a different viewpoint on now, and I'm proud to be endorsed by them. On the issue of my faith, it has never been about discrimination or hatred. And so, you grow, and I certainly have become a strong ally over the last 30 years, and that's why I'm endorsed by Equality Florida and the Stonewall Democrats. I help lead enshrining protections in the countywide human rights ordinance to protect folks from jobs and housing discrimination based on sexual orientation back in 2008. That's how long ago that was. And in 2013, as chairman of the commission, I led the effort to add protections for our transgender community, and also led the effort to create a domestic partnership registry. So I've worked with the LGBTQ community for well over a decade. I'm a proud ally and proud to be supported by them as well. You learn, you grow. I'm glad that I have.
Diversity has been a major topic, across the U.S., here in St. Pete. What are you going to do to make sure your administration reflects the community of St. Pete?
Well, I go back to my endorsements. If you look at my endorsements at kenwelch.com, you'll see the folks who are supporting me look like our community. Every political party, every neighborhood, folks of faith, who don't have a faith walk. I believe in looking at issues like housing, like homelessness, which you led on here in St. Petersburg, and helped create Pinellas Hope and support for 400 people having a path out of homelessness. Focusing on transportation and housing and those kinds of issues. When you focus on the issues in a project and find common goals and common purpose, then that is fully inclusive. I also believe in being out in the community. And you may have heard I drove 1,000 Uber and Lyft rides as a driver in this community in 2018 and 19 to hear directly from people without any filter. I also had a 4.97 rating as a driver, so I believe in customer service. But I would just believe in being out with the people no matter where they are. I've done that as a county commissioner. I've held community office hours in libraries and fire stations. I want to be where the people are and hear from them, and I think that's what the people want to see.
Pew Research has shown that voters across the country trust in the government is at an all-time low. So why should voters trust you?
I think my track record of community service, even before I was a commissioner, I served on the St. Pete College Board of Trustees, for example, on the Boys and Girls Club Board of Directors, YMCA Board of Directors, YWCA Trustee Board. I've always cared about this community. I even wrote so many letters to the editor that I became a My View columnist for the then St. Pete Times as a college student. And so I've always cared about this community. And you know, our surveying shows when I was at the county that although there's a distrust in political leadership as a whole, at the local level, there's a pretty high degree of support, because we call it the public's principle. You know, folks are going to see you in the grocery store and they're going to ask you what you're doing. And you know, that's why we focus on issues, on working together, and that's why I think folks should support me. Look at what I've done, look at my accessibility, and look at my vision for our future.
There's obviously going to be people that vote for you and people that don't vote for you. So how are you going to build bridges with the people that don't vote for you? So
I've been married 31 years, and I know you don't win every battle, and you're not in charge of everything. Look, after this election, we're going to have a transition process. We want everybody at the table. We want the best ideas of how we move St. Pete forward, and we want that from everyone. Whether you voted for me or not, we want your input.